Hey, it's the social worker here. I decided to come to do another video. One, because as usual, I am writing a paper and I'm distracted because I don't want to do it. And it's irritating me because it's on something that I am not familiar with and do not easily gravitate to. And this fly is getting on my nerves, which is for my social policy class. And so for my social policy class, we had to pick a social issue that we would like to fix or, create policy for. And then that was our first paper. Then the second paper, excuse me, we have to, because it was actually due yesterday and I didn't get it done. So I'm still working on it. But this is not about that. However, this next paper is about creating a budget or looking at the budget, like for whatever social policy issue that I chose, looking for the funding for, that particular program, which I chose CalWORKS, a California program. So I don't like it. I don't like the numbers. I don't like the budget sheets, and I don't understand. Anyway, it's a lot of information. Anyway, the purpose of this video is twofold. So one is for me because one, I've been asked a few times of like, why social work? Why did I choose social work? And then I've heard in other situations from other people in the field and from other people in the field that are like, when it's hard, when you're doing the work and you're having those hard days, like, revisiting your why you chose social work. And so this video is to help me to reflect on the days when it's hard and I have papers and I don't want to do the papers. And then also, if you were interested or curious, like what made her choose social work? Because there's a stigma and a lot of people have negative feelings when it comes to social workers. And so what I will say first is that I did not always want to be a social worker. Even when I chose social work, it wasn't even like I watched I was a part of this group which was called Clinicians of Color, and we had a speaker, and one of the speakers was I believe his name was Lee Daniels, and he has an organization that he created or founded in Massachusetts, which is called Fathers Uplift. And during that session, he made a statement and said social work chose him. And so that resonated with me. And so I borrow that sentiment in the sense that social work chose me. However, when I look back over my life and I look back, on how two things. One, I was always advocating for other people, even when they didn't ask me to. Like, for the most part, I was that coworker, and I think I shared this in another video. Like, we could be in staff meetings or things like that, and when I felt like people were being bullied or they weren't being listened to, or what they were saying was being dismissed, I was often the one who would jump in and try to reframe what the person was saying, or like, hey, so-and-so is trying to make a statement, this is how they're feeling. People would come to me and be like, oh, if they didn't want to say something, they would ask me to say it because I didn't have a problem talking. So that's the first thing. But this is more on like an individual, interpersonal level. And then the second part of why I wanted, when I think of this field, the idea, social justice, helping people through hard things, I think of my own life and I think about all of the different, experiences that I've had, if you want to say ACEs, which is adverse childhood experiences. Like, when I think of the different things that I've gone through in my life, I did not have the help that I wish I had, even though I didn't always know exactly what help I needed. And so, towards the latter part of my years, I'm 48 years old today. And so for the last I'll just say 20 years. I could be off with that, but I'm going to say for the last 20 years, I've gone through some really hard things. And, you know, I'm like, okay, first I'm like, I want to be a marriage and family therapist, because I was like, okay, I want to be able to understand why my marriage is jacked up. Like, I couldn't understand, you know, I'm since divorced, but at the time I was like, okay, like, what's going on? Like, is it me? Is it my spouse? Like, what is it that's going on? So I wanted to, no, I'm sorry. Let me back up. Before marriage and family counseling, I wanted to be, or my undergraduate degree is in psychology and Christian counseling. And so that idea of psychology, understanding the mind, understanding, you know, what we think, I didn't get the answers that I was looking for, but my reason for going into psychology and Christian counseling is because I wanted to understand what was going on with my marriage. I wanted to understand what was going wrong. You know, was it me? Is it my spouse? Like, what's happening? And then because I heavily relied on my Christian faith, it was like, okay, well, naturally, I'm going to be a Christian counselor. So needless to say, that didn't give me the answers that I was looking for, but I got my bachelor's degree in that. So now, fast forward, I'm still going through hard things. I'm still trying to figure these things out. And then it got to a point where it was like, okay, you know what? You're not responsible for trying to fix someone else. That's not your job. Like, you are not capable of doing that. So you need to focus on fixing you and figuring out what's going on with you. And so then from there, it was like, okay, oh wow, like I've experienced this, and you know, I'm dealing with this, and this is that, and making sense of things. Then it's like, okay, you know what? All right, I got it. So now I'm like, there's other people that are going through what I'm going through. So I want to help them and be for them what I always wished that I had. So that's where that part came from. So then when I was thinking like, okay, when I'm thinking, okay, now I'm about to be divorced at this point, I'm thinking, and I'm like, okay, I have 3 kids, you know, the job that I had previous to the pandemic, I'm like, there's no way that I can survive and raise 3 kids on a job that was making $15 an hour. I'm like, there's absolutely no way. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to go back to school. So, you know, for those of you who are watching this who are not familiar with who I am, have not been a part or followed me on any platforms, there was a period of time where I was really trying to be like this internet encourager, influencer, and I would create videos and, you know, make content back then with my heavily like Christian views. And I just couldn't figure that out. Like, there's people who are making, you know, money online, and they're, you know, they're creating brands and they're doing things. And so that's what I was interested in doing. I was like, oh, I could be a coach. I could do this. But that's not me. Like, you know what I'm saying? It was not conducive for me. I could not figure out the formula on how to do that. And I needed to pay bills. So I'm like, okay, that's not working out for me. So I need to go back to school, because people are like, oh, you could be an entrepreneur. You could do this. You could do that. And for me, I had not found my niche or that thing that was going to, you know, be lucrative for me. So for me, the next step was, okay, you need to go back to school. So for my master's degree, you know, I'm like, first I'm like, okay, maybe I'll go for marriage and family therapy. Maybe I'll go for a behavioral therapist, because I used to do like be a one-on-one aide. They're out here in California, and I don't know if it's per industry or if it's statewide. I'm not really sure how that works, but out in California, it's called a BII, a Behavior Intervention Implementer. And so I was a one-on-one aide for school-age children that were on the spectrum, that had autism. And so I was like, oh, I'll just, you know, get my master's and, you know, become a behavioral therapist. But then the pandemic happened, and that kind of shifted. I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. Marriage and family therapy, but the process to become a marriage and family therapist, I was like, I don't think that I can commit to that. I don't think that would work. And originally that thought was like, okay, you know, I wanted to fix my marriage. But whatever, that didn't work out. I didn't do that. So then I was like, okay, talking to my cousin, one of my cousins, my uncle, and a good friend of mine that I kind of grew up with from high school, I should say, and maybe not say just grew up with. But a friend of mine, they're all social workers. And they were all like, for many years, they were talking to me about social work, and you should go into social work. Even when I was going to get my bachelor's degree in psychology and Christian counseling, they were like, why would you do psychology? Like, nobody's trying to hire you. And because this whole, how do I want to say this? Like, me being the young Christian woman that I was, I, felt like I heard from God, and, I felt like that's what he wanted me to do. So I was like, well, no, because I have this burden on me, and I feel like God is calling me to be, to do psychology and blah, blah, blah. So needless to say, I didn't listen because I felt like this is what God is calling me to do. And, I'm not going to say that wasn't what he wanted for me to do. However, I didn't get a job in psychology and Christian counseling. So here we are, fast forward. I remembered the things that my cousin, this friend, and my uncle were saying to me. So I called them again and was kind of getting some feedback from them. And my cousin was like, interestingly enough, whether you realize it or not, like, I've always seen you as my phone is ringing, and I don't know if this is going to mess up the video, but I saw my cousin was like, you, like, I've always seen you as a social worker. Like, it's just in you. Like, and, so when I think about that, and she's like, I see you going on to do big things as a social worker. And because social work is so big, like, there's so many different career paths that you can choose with social work. And so after sitting with that, for some time, then I didn't realize that, and I'm not giving a lot of details on purpose because this video is already 12 minutes long. So if you stay to the end, you'll understand. But, I was one of those people who was in an abusive marriage and didn't know that I was in an abusive marriage. I did not know until the end. Like, granted, throughout the marriage, there were a lot of things that I did not like that were, that there was just a lot of things that were not okay with that relationship. But I didn't know that they fall in line under abuse. I didn't know that. So when I figured that out, then it was like, okay, I'm a survivor of domestic violence, and I want to help other women. Like, that's heavy. Like, the things that I've experienced, there's so many different things that I've experienced, which I kind of touched on in the beginning of the video. But ultimately, because of the trauma, because at a certain point I started realizing what trauma was, and I started learning, just that we as human beings go through a lot, because we as individuals a lot of times are broken, and then we end up having children, and then that brokenness doesn't just get healed, it just doesn't go away, and it affects how we choose relationships. It affects how, who we interact with and who we have kids with, and then our stuff spills over onto our children. And of course, those children grow up, they become adults, and then they start that cycle all over again. They start dating, and then they get married, or they have kids, or whatever it is. And so it's just this cycle of trauma that if it's not addressed, and if that generation does not break whatever that cycle is, it's going to continue to carry on. And so for me, I'm like, no, like, to me, and based on my level of understanding, trauma is at the core of everything. And that word has been used so much that I think people who, I'm going to say lay people who are not, therapists or, social workers, or, are well-versed in mental health, will say like, oh my gosh, they blame everything on trauma. Like, everything is not trauma. Like, I didn't have everything that I wanted when I grew up, and I grew up to be fine. And I challenge when people say that, because it's like, when you really, really peel back the layers and you look at your behaviors and how you behave, no, we're not fine. We're really not. Like, a lot of stuff that we do and how we treat people and how we raise our kids is rooted in trauma. And so with that being said, that is what ultimately led me into the field of social work, because I ultimately want to help people. I ultimately, which I didn't realize, that this, social work programs cause you to be extremely introspective. Like, really, you really have to like look within to find out what your triggers and your traumas and, your trauma is and things that you've experienced, because you have to make sure that you don't take that into the therapeutic relationship when you are, when you have clients and you're seeing people. So, ultimately, I just have a heart to help people. But the interesting thing is, as much as I want to help people, I am also still dealing with my own trauma. So it's difficult at times because I have to be, now thankfully I'm not seeing any clients right now. For those of you who have been following me for a while, you would know this. For those who don't, I was injured on my job. I had to take a leave of absence from school and from my job, and I was out from everything since January of 2024. And so September of this year, 2024, I entered back into school. And so I'm still off from work, though, because I'm not cleared to go back to work with my restrictions and all that stuff. However, I'm back in school, and so I'm getting back into that swing of things. So I'm not seeing clients right now, but I'm just like, oh my gosh, like it's so much. Like when I hear people say like, oh, therapy is just sitting, all you do is sit there and listen to people talk all day. It is definitely not that. Like there's so many things that we're paying attention to, or that we're supposed to be paying attention to, that we're supposed to be assessing, that we're supposed to be listening for. Like therapy is not just listening to people talk. So, anyway, this video is way too long, but that is why social work is a little different from what I'm understanding from other fields, in that we're advocates for our clients. So like, a marriage and family therapist, maybe, I don't know for a fact, but my understanding right now, I'm in my third year of school, almost done, 2 more semesters left after this one. And my understanding that separates social workers from other disciplines of therapy is that, an MFT, a marriage and family therapist, can meet with you and, you can express to them that you're experiencing certain things. And, they do that one-on-one session with you and it stays there. But as a social worker, my understanding is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody does watch this, because like these are my beginning videos, so I don't know who's going to watch them because I don't have a lot of engagement or followers on this page. However, if you're still here, the idea of a social worker is that, one, we do that individual, therapy to kind of help you get unstuck and get where, work through whatever it is that you're trying to work through. We also are there to offer you resources if you need things, if you need food, if you need clothing, if you need health insurance, if you need transportation to doctor's appointments, or, these things. These are the things that we help you to find resources for. And then the other aspect of, if we're seeing that systems are affecting our clients in a way that it's affecting people at large and it's a big issue, then social workers then go into the macro or the governmental policy space and advocate for policies to change for the better, so that our clients are not struggling with the things that they're struggling with. Like, the example, if you're not familiar with any of this, like if somebody lives in a food desert, pretty much what that is, from my understanding, is like, if the neighborhood that you live in, there's no major grocery stores, there's no grocery stores in your neighborhood, and you have to travel more than 20 miles or something like that. You have to travel really far to get to a supermarket. And you may not have a car or anything like that. Like, that's considered a food desert. So in these communities, social workers would then come in and try to figure out how to advocate for change, to either get them a supermarket or whatever, to try to change that situation for them. Another aspect of that people may be familiar with, which I didn't know this before I started this program, is that like the Department of Department of Social Services, and how they, food stamps and CalWorks programs that give like cash aid and all that stuff. Those things were created by social workers. You know what I'm saying? Because people were not being able to they couldn't make ends meet. They needed additional support. with the jobs that they had, or if they didn't have jobs. And so these programs have been created to fill a need and to close a gap of something that was missing in communities. And so it's like, okay, so now the one piece though that I'm not, which goes back to this paper that I said I was writing, one thing that I'm not that I don't fully understand is policy. Like, I'm not somebody who, I was not, that has to change. I, growing up was not somebody who watched the news and who was into politics, and, which is interesting. It's like I'm studying to be a social worker, but I'm not up on current events. I'm not interested. So that is something that I have to shift. Yeah, because how could you fight for social justice if you're not aware of the issues and things that are going on in the world, and things that people are struggling with if you're not paying attention. And so that is something that I've been learning. That's interesting. But anywho, that is all. So this is why social work. So I figured if I'm going to start a page where I'm talking about social work and, me being in school, I should at least express why I chose social work in the first place. I still am at a place where I don't know what I want to do with my degree. I do want to be a clinical social worker. I'm not necessarily interested in opening a private practice, but I have time to kind of figure out what direction I want to do, and maybe I'll have to do a whole bunch of different things before I realize where I want to fit myself for the time being, because I feel like, people who are in this field, they move around a lot. And so, that is my video for today. That is what I wanted to share. So now I'm going to go try to work on this paper and get it done. So wish me luck. Pray for me, because this paper is a little special. Anyway, have a wonderful day. Until next time.